DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. We have come today to honor and celebrate the life of Robin Lee Spritzman. We come to remember her and to honor those memories that each of you holds. We will give expression to those memories both publicly and privately. Even as we celebrate Robin's life, we will grieve Robin's death. For grief is love's inevitable price. So today, we must hold each other's hearts tenderly as we remember Robin. Robin chose a number of quotes, hymns, and music that she wanted shared during this, her celebration of life. Keep in mind that she chose these so that those that are gathered here today would feel her presence nearby and learn a little bit more about her. You have heard the music this morning already of Beethoven, Wagner, Intermezzo, and Johann Pachelbel. On the back of your order of service, you will find the salutation to the dawn from the Sanskrit, which Robin also chose for today's service. Look to this day, for it is life, the very breath of life. In its brief course lie all the realities of your existence, the bliss of growth, the glory of action, the beauty. For yesterday is already a dream, and tomorrow is only a vision. But today, well lived, makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope. Look well, therefore, to this day. Robin lived a long and full life, and she kept a thorough record of her experiences. I read all of them. We will not be able to share all of them today, but the many binders of her memories are treasure, a treasure trove of memories for her family. So today, we are going to share a few of those. Families asked me to share some words, and Robin's children will share some words. But you, all of you gathered here, you will fill in the rest in your own hearts and minds as we remember Robin today. I invite you to rise in body or spirit, and we're going to sing our first hymn today. It's printed on the back of your order of service and will be projected here to your left. Splendor of the Morning Sun. Soon after moving to Lisle in 1955 into a new home with Dick, her husband, and her 3 children, Robin wrote in her autobiography, "I learned that there was a newly organized Unitarian church. After attending the Lisle Congregational Church with Norma Martin and found it was formed by people from that church, several families were from Lisle, including Winnie Campbell, who lived 2 houses away from us on Dumoulin Avenue. What? Dumoulin Avenue. That's why I have the family here. I found the church then meeting in old Bronsonville schoolhouse, which they were renting, located in an unincorporated area between Lisle and Naperville. And just to let you know, that's still here. I took the girls to Sunday school. Dick was content to stay home with Rex. I enjoyed more about Unitarianism by reading Sophia Fah's Yesterday's Heritage and Today's Children. Since her first Sunday at this church, Robin has been and remained an active member until her death. That was 50 years as a member of this church. The family asked that we play the following video in which Robin recorded what this church meant to her.
Good morning. I'm Robin Spriesma, here to tell you about my beloved church. There are many reasons why the DupageUU Church is my beloved church. The first reason has to do with time. One gets very attached to a place after what has been, for me, almost 60 years. That is also about the length of time that I've been a Unitarian. My membership here, followed by a year or two, my introduction to Unitarianism, which was at the Unitarian Church in Baltimore, Maryland. It was brief, but very enlightening. When part of one Sunday service, Dr. Argo, the minister, told the congregation to look into yourselves, for answers, not to a papa in the sky. I became interested. You see, I had come from a congregational church background, and I was becoming dissatisfied with its practices. I really no longer believed or wanted to speak the Apostles' Creed. I felt no meaning in taking in the bread and wine of communion. So when my parents, in September 1955, Dick and I moved to Lisle, a town closer to where my parents lived. I was pleased to find that the previous year, the Lisle Congregational Church minister, Eugene Creeves, had left that church, and many liberal-minded members of it had joined him to become affiliated with the Unitarian Church. Wow, how could I be more lucky? So I attended the DuPage Valley Unitarian Church. Oh, let's see, there it is right up there. See? This is a picture of Gene and Corinne Creeves in front of the old schoolhouse with its name on the entrance. You see if you can see it. The valley was dropped later. So I joined the church with the support of my husband and brought our 3 children to Sunday school, Suzanne, Lindy, and Rex. Suzanne now attending a Unitarian church in New Jersey. Lindy, very active here, as you probably know. And Rex, my son, reflects our views and does call himself a Unitarian. In fact, even my 4 grandchildren have been raised in a Unitarian church, and 2 of them right here at Sunday school. So there are more reasons for this being my beloved church. I found here that one did have the freedom to interpret their own life experiences. And here was a place to join others in such a religious community, to be bound together, just as the word religion is defined, bound together. It was easy to become part of a small church. As soon as I joined, I was asked to be a recording secretary of the coordinating council, as they called. A few years later, I served as a financial secretary, keeping track of the pledges. I taught Sunday school and was a member of the RE committee. I later belonged to the bookshop and library committee, which I still do, and the visitor relations. And I have served as historian, putting together each year a paper copy of a volume of our church, history and events. I made a lot of good friends among the founding members when I came, particularly Winnie Campbell. I think many of you remember Winnie, and Kay Weller. Together, we started the women's group. It was during the early 1950s when we had just become Unitarian Universalists. So, to mark that event, we called the group the Unitarian University Women's Association, or the UUWA, which is still active and alive today. To add to those reasons, my family celebrated many events here. When my first granddaughter, Michelle, was born, her parents brought her back here to be dedicated in 1978. And some 25 years later, she came back to be married here. Dick's memorial service was held here when he died in 1973, and we planted that ginkgo tree that's out in front in his memory. I've celebrated 2 birthdays, my 75th and my 90th. And let's see, let's have the second picture of yeah, there they are, Kendall Gibbons with the Creeves when she was minister here. I've had so many good friends here, especially those who came to visit and wheeled me back to my apartment to see my cat when I broke my leg several years ago. A great part of my life has been spent here, and over the years, I've worked with others at applying Unitarian principles to issues such as civil rights, abortion choices, recycling when it first became popular, and staying green. In every way, the DupageUU Church has been my beloved church. And if I begin to think too long about what it means to me, it brings tears to my eyes, reflecting my gratitude for this, my beloved church.
English actor and filmmaker Sir Richard Attenborough wrote, "No one person's life can be encompassed in one telling. There is no way to give each year its allotted weight, to include each event, each person who helped shape a lifetime. What can be done is to be faithful in spirit to the record and try to find one's way to the heart of the person." What a celebration of life at its best should be is a reflection of the facts of a life and appealing back through the facts into the heart of the person. I thought the best way to start down this path is to share excerpts from Robin's autobiography. She begins her autobiography this way. "In considering one's life, there seem to be three dimensions which I feel define it, which influence the development of our personality and growth of our intellect: being, place, and time. Being concerns our heredity and genes, our immediate and greater family. Place, or surroundings, neighborhood, and school. And time, the years in which we live, the events that take place in the world. The effects of these three dimensions is mostly felt in childhood. For me, Robin, it was being born in a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant family, or WASP, middle class in wealth and education. I was born on November 26, 1921. Then came Raymond Arthur Probert, Jr., born July 6, 1923. My brother and I were the only grandchildren on both sides of the family. The immediate family members all living in the area, if not with us on occasion. Good fortune smiled on this child. Perhaps the bad fairy did not come to add a stubborn willfulness to this plump, firstborn love baby, since inherited traits included soft teeth and nearsightedness. From a poem her Aunt Bobby had written for her, etched on her silver-plated baby cup was this phrase: "Robin Lee, who has Lady Moon's small, cool smile." My friends, I'm breaking now from her autobiography to tell you that I only knew Robin for about 3.5 years, but there wasn't one time in those 3.5 years that she wasn't smiling. She greeted me cheerfully every time I saw her and gave me a firm handshake. In the time I knew her, she lived at Brookdale, and her best friend there was Ellie LaFountain. I think the reason Robin and Ellie were close friends was because they both had a sharp mind and could share insights about politics, society, many things, including this church. And Robin would always read the church newsletter to Ellie, and they would spend time discussing it. When I visited, they both had questions for me about how things were going on this church, and they were very educated on what was going on because they'd read the whole newsletter. I remember that. And we always had a lovely conversation. So let's go back to Robin's autobiography. Let me tell you a little of her early life. The house my parents bought in Oak Park was a bungalow. It had 2 large rooms upstairs under a peaked roof. Behind this roof, a slant roof covered the kitchen with a bathroom and pantry off of it and a back porch. And there was an entrance foyer, living room, followed by a dining room and a bedroom off each room. Recommended by Arthur, my parents took off the front porch, completely took off the front porch, added a cornice over the front door, and an iron railing up the stairs and the sides of the landing in front of the house. There was a brass knocker on the front door, no doorbell. The house was painted white, and they were proud of their house and its look on the block. My mother used to sketch it on several Christmas cards, and she made all her Christmas cards by hand, a practice followed by Raymond and me for many years. The house was on a narrow lot, 50 by 100 feet. A snowball tree was the only thing that grew on the narrow strip of grass beside the house and sidewalk to the backyard on the south side. The house was on a quiet, red brick, cottonwood-lined street across from the high-boarded coal yard. Down the street from us in 3 blocks was a park. Our block was designated to be added as parkland, but to this day remains a coal yard. My father built a high wooden fence put on the side of the backyard with a gated green gate. Halfway down the right side of the backyard, my father bought a huge galvanized tub, maybe 10 feet across, which he sunk halfway into the ground, surrounded it with sand and a low fence for Ramey and me to play in. In the summer, it was filled with water and became a bathing pool for us. Beyond that was a vegetable plot. Halfway down the left side of the house was lilac bushes. Beyond that, an elderberry bush, its berries used for elderberry wine at least once. In front of the garage was a cherry tree, source of many jars of jam and cherry pies. Years later, my father built a barbecue pit out of cement blocks in that area. And as we grew, a swing set was installed behind the porch. Right behind the porch, which faced east, was a plot of spring flowers. On the left side of the yard, the north side, was a wire fence maintained by the Hintzes next door. There were several laundry poles inside the fences, which my father would string with clothesline every Monday in fair weather for laundry. I must have been about 4 when we moved in. I remember the narrow, boarded, highly polished floors. The waist-high wainscoting in the dining room was pulled off and discarded. It went out into the alley along with the discarded front porch. The dining room walls were papered by my father and the woodwork painted white from its dark to light. My mother had lace curtains and heavy green velvet drapes which could be drawn to cover up the front double window, the 2 dining room windows, and hung between the 2 rooms. A china cabinet was built into the wall between the dining room and the kitchen, and in that corner facing the dining room was a telephone stand with a tall black telephone. Our telephone number was Euclid 9798R. How many of you remember your telephone number 80 years ago? When the receiver was lifted off its hook and held in one's hand, the operator would say, "Number, please." We'd give the number and we'd wait for the number to start ringing. Next part is really fascinating to me. In the bathroom, they had a clawed feet bathtub. At its foot was room for a wooden rack for towels, 5 rods for the 5 people in the house. The sink and toilet were on the west wall. At various times, the walls had colorful tropical fish or seascapes and ships with nautical verses. This is one of those nautical verses from John Mansfield's Sea Fever. I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea and the sky. And all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer by. And the wheels kick and the wind's song and the white sails shaking and a gray mist on the sea's face and a great dawn breaking. I must go down to the seas again, for the call of running tide is a wild call and a clear call that must not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day with the white clouds flying and the flung spray and the brown spume and the seagulls crying. I must go down to the seas again, to the vagrant gypsy life, to the gull's way and the whale's way, where the wind's like whetted knife. And all I ask is a merry yarn from a laughing fellow rover, and quiet sleep and a sweet dream when the long trick's over. Apparently, one of the rituals was that people could write under the poems in the bathroom. Going on, she says, my mother mainly shopped at the Oak Park Avenue A&P. One waited behind a long counter for the clerk to wait on you with a list. The clerk got everything you asked for, weighed the potatoes, onions, rice, crackers, cookies, whatever came in bulk, weighed and ground the coffee, got the cans, packaged goods from the shelves behind, often climbing the ladder attached to rollers near the ceiling so it could be rolled back and forth to reach the top shelves. And when all was assembled on the counter, the clerk wrote on the paper bag in heavy black pen each item and totaled it all up. How many of you remember things like that? Music was a big part of my childhood, Robin said. We sang, played, danced to it. We danced to it on records and radio. We had a tall upright piano replaced by a low cable Nelson spinet. My mother taught herself to play popular songs like Red Sails in the Sunset, and always ended with her favorite, Love and Passion. Robin says she loved hearing her mother play. He went on to say, I was encouraged to sing in the young people's choir at the First Congregational Church, which sang for Vesper services on Sunday. I started taking ballet lessons at Miss Possert's Dance School of Dance. I started when I was 6. My mother made me a pink bodysuit that had a separate white ruffle tutu to wear and ballet slippers to practice. In the middle of the beginning of the lessons were held in the auditorium of a chilly Masonic hall. But in high school, I left ballet for modern dance. I made the decision not to continue ballet. I felt I didn't have the slender figure for it and lacked the will and comfort with my body to move freely. So Lindy, where are you? Suzanne, Rex. I want to stop here and tell you what a joy it has been to read through all these binders. So many things, not just the written words, but she had photos and she had things from newspapers and from grocery stores and all kinds of things. From just recording a history of a life was just amazing. And I was just so privileged to read about her life in her own words. Robin goes on and talks about many things in these binders. Her family's traditions for the holidays, her trips. She kept records and thorough pictures of all kinds of things. A year-long sabbatical in France with her husband and Rex. The time she used money that she'd gotten from an insurance settlement to go take Lindy and Suzanne to the British Isles, and then the next year to Europe. And she started going to elder hostels and went with friends for about 20 years. Her first time to go was when she was 66, and her last was when she was 86. And she didn't, these are just some of the things. She also reflected on the world. One of the passages says that she was sitting comfortably in 1970 and decided to write this. I mentioned 2 current events in my journal on a quiet weekend in February that I spent recovering from a bad cold, with Paul and Cinnamon for company, while Rex and Dick went off to the Chanute flying field. Is that right? Close enough? With Stan Weller. The first one she said is, the revolt of youth against the establishment reflected in high school and college students rejecting existing standards of dress, hairstyle and length, and sexual activity, insisting that these were areas most relevant to them to define for themselves. The second one, she said, blacks finding themselves in a white society. My current example was the bizarre trial of what was to be known as the Chicago Seven, including Black Panther Bobby Seale, accused of conspiring to incite riots at the recent Chicago Democratic Convention. Robin was the first college graduate in her family when she graduated from Cornell College. Following her husband's death in 1973, she earned a library technical assistant degree from the College of DuPage. In 1976, she became the first children's librarian of the Lisle Public Library, a position in which she served until her retirement in 1989. Liz Kuttner-Bowling wrote in an email to me about Robin's work at the Children's Library as the children's librarian the following. I consider Robin Spreetsma to be one of my earliest mentors. My relationship with her is one of my earliest memories. I can remember as a small tyke climbing the stairs to story time at the old library where I would sit while she read me story after story. It was here that I first remember loving books. As I grew older, she became my first boss as a page in the library. Here she taught me the value of having a good work ethic. She also entrusted me to watch her home, animals, and plants when she would go on vacation. And it was here that she taught me about trust and responsibility. As an adult, we shared our yearly newsletters. We often commented that we agreed on political views, love of animals, and of course, shared book preferences. She always added a little note about my girls that made me feel like my life was a success. She was always a positive influence in my life. A few weeks ago, I found a letter in my mailbox that she had been called home after so many quality years here on earth. Of course, my heart was broken. It goes without saying I am a better person for having known her. And the world is a much better place because she was part of it. Her legacy will live on in the millions of lives she touched with her gentleness, compassion, guidance, and her love of books. Robin also served as president of each organization in which she was a member. She was president of the Downers Grove American Association of University Women and a longtime member. In addition, as a homemaker, while her children were young, she served as a president and member of the Lisle Home and School Organization. In addition, she was a founding member and president of the Lisle Heritage Society, as well as a guild member and quilter. Robin shared her love of books as a great book discussions leader. How many of you have done the great book discussions? Fabulous, yes. She was also a member of 3 different book clubs: the American Association of University Women, the DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church, and the Lisle Library throughout her adult life. When she moved to Brookdale of Lisle, she became the librarian of the Brookdale Library and ran the book discussion group for residents. She also served on the resident board. She would always, when I'd go over there, she'd always tell me, they need to turn these books back in. They can't keep them out. And Robin faced adversity with grace and determination. Of course, the death of her husband, and then much later, breast cancer. She was diagnosed in June 1999. She learned of the diagnosis just before she and Suzanne were going to the Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly, where the minister of Suzanne's California Unitarian Universalist congregation, Reverend Mark Bellatini, was to give the service of the living tradition. After hearing her treatment options, she decided to have a mastectomy, but would only have it after going to General Assembly as planned. Following the surgery, she was advised that a follow-up treatment of chemotherapy would decrease the likelihood of a recurrence. When she heard how small the decrease would be, she opted out of undergoing chemotherapy. Her children tried to persuade her, arguing that they wanted to maximize her chances. Nevertheless, Robin emphasized that she was satisfied with the life she had lived, and even if it would decrease her chances of survival, she did not want to spend her summer undergoing chemotherapy for such a small potential benefit. And the cancer never recurred. I want to share one more email that we received from Nancy Aaron Bailey. The only ballet and piano lessons I ever had were from Robin. How I wish I had been less stubborn and more motivated to practice. As an adult, I feel a deep appreciation for her efforts. Robin truly wanted to instill a love of culture in us preteens. And on a cold, snowy December Saturday, loaded Suzanne, Lindy, and me on a train and took us into Chicago to see our first Nutcracker. How brave was that? I'll never forget that to this day. We even purchased little ballerina statuettes. I guarded mine with my life for a very long time. Weenie sandwiches. 2 steamed wieners split lengthwise and laid on buttered toasted bread with ketchup. This is a Robin at my house. I'll never forget her serving us those whenever we visited. At 70, I still love those sandwiches. I've served them with joy to many others throughout the years who failed to share my enthusiasm. Nevertheless, to me, they are awesome. I'm certain many more fond memories will come to mind once I click send, but for now, those are the most vivid. Robin touched so many lives, and those of us whose paths intersected hers are so much better for having known her. We all carry a little bit of Robin with us into the future. Canadian author, academic, and politician Michael Ignatieff wrote, "One of the greatest feelings in life is the conviction that you have lived the life you wanted to live, with the rough and the smooth, the good and the bad, but yours, shaped by your own choices and not someone else's." When I think of Robin, I think of this quote. She lived a life of her own choices and lived it full and wonderfully. Finally, I want to share one more thing with you. I don't know if you noticed as you came in, there was a beautiful, magnificent, big ginkgo tree out there that was planted in memory of Dick Spreetsma, Robin's husband. The family will be placing a dedicated bench out by Dick's tree to remember Robin, to offer all of us a place to rest, a place to reflect. And Robin and Dick will be reunited in loving memory as they were once united by love in life. I invite you now to stand in body or spirit and let's sing one of Robin's favorite songs, Blue Boat Home. Words will be projected to your left. Now each of Robin's children will come forward to share some memories and reflections. Suzanne?
I'm Suzanne Spreetsma Halleck, the firstborn, and so I guess the first speaker. Two values that were central to my life have been themes in my relationship to her and have influenced how I've lived my life. And that's what I'd like to speak about. First of all was the value of maintaining relationships. Now this meant not only with family, because Mom was very determined we all keep talking to each other, no matter what, okay? But it was also with friends. And she took the matter of maintaining friendships very seriously through visits and correspondence. As a young adult, as Rev Tom has mentioned, she created her own Christmas cards. She composed an original message each year. So for example, in 1969, this was, "Whatever is lost with the years, whatever else changes, Christmas remains a time of happy recollections, a time for remembering treasured friends." And she did treasure each and every one of her friends. Beginning in 1980, she started typing out a longer message and making copies to include with cards. And in her view of this undertaking was reflected in the opening words of her little missive that year. Her opening words were, "To each of you out there who has touched my life and made it more worth the living, greetings." More worth the living. This is how she viewed every relationship. When she retired in 1989, she told me she's considering cutting back. Maybe she'd just send one out every other year or so. And I said, "No, are you kidding? You've got to send these out every year." So I said, "I'll buy the stamps. All right, and I'll start copying it all." So I took on, 100 stamps, 100 copies, and then a few years later, she accepted my offer to type it. And by then I had a computer, so I could give it to her, in rough draft form and then revise it. Her letter followed a distinctive format, typical of our mother. It had 4 sections. It never could be longer than one typed page, maybe a half extra, but no longer. It always had to fit on one page. Started out usually, the first paragraph or the first section was a brief status report. Minimal emphasis on physical complaints, even though she acknowledged them, and selective descriptions of interesting observations. Like she'd gone to these elder hospitals, as Rev Tom mentioned, for 20 years. And she'd always have some new fact or interesting thing that she wanted to talk about or share. Secondly was a paragraph commenting on current events and affecting the country and the world, and explicitly stating her point of view. So she said quite clearly, warning everybody in 2004, "You know from my previous letters how liberal I am in politics, social causes, and religion," and then she proceeded to go forth with her opinions. The third paragraph always was an update on family members, on Lindy and Rex and me, on our kids. I have 2 daughters, 5 grandchildren, on Lindy's son Edwin, on Rex's son Ross, and then later his 2 younger sons Raymond and Richie. Now, of course, we didn't always agree with her summaries of our activities, but this was my mother's letter. And in fact, sometimes Rex and Lindy would say, "Why did you let her put that in?" I said, I just typed it, okay? All right. The 4th section always was book recommendations. And it included, my mother was thorough, okay, 2 to 3 works of fiction that she thought particularly exemplary, 2 to 3 works of nonfiction, and then, just in case that wasn't enough, there was a little light reading. Okay, so a couple of her favorite mysteries, maybe a story about dogs or cats, but maybe horses, but she always had, something for everyone to read. The focus on relationships is evident in the readings that she identified as wanting us to read at this service. And her selections, I don't know, Rev Tim didn't mention this, my mother left a 3-page single-spaced document regarding what the arrangements were to be following her death. Okay, so this included 5 readings. It included 8 pieces of music with notes on each one. So she was very thorough. Okay, so this is one of the readings. It's a brief prose poem. I cannot think of them as dead who walk with me no more. Along the path of life I tread, they are but gone before. And still, their silent friendship within my heart has place. As when on earth they walked with me and met me face to face. Their lives are made forever mine. What they have to me been has left henceforth its seal and sign engraven deep within. Mine are there by a promise, nor time nor death can free. For love has power still to keep its own eternity. And I think that emphasis on the silent friendship that has been engraven on the hearts of everyone who's known her bears emphasis. I think with this poem, she addresses how, faced with the reality of loss, how do we transform a relationship with a living person into a sustaining internal presence? And she says we can do it. She's determined. She had another piece selection that she wanted read, in which she says, death is nothing at all. I've only slipped away into the next room. I can imagine my mother saying this. Everything remains exactly as it was. I am I, you are you, and the old life we lived so fondly together is untouched, unchanged. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by the old familiar name. Speak of me in the easy way which you always used. Put no difference into your time. Wear no false air of forced solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed at the little jokes we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without an effort, without the ghost of a shadow upon it. Life means all that it ever meant. It's the same as it ever was. There's absolute and unbroken continuity. Why should I be out of mind because I'm out of sight? We thought this a lot as kids, you know. I'm somewhere near, just around the corner. All is well. And it feels to me, when I read this, she was offering advice on how do you create continuity? How do you transform and preserve what we value in a relationship when that person has died? The third poem that I'm going to read was another one my mom insisted on. And I do want to point out, we discovered these when she died. Even though I typed it up, I'd completely forgotten that we had 5 readings we had to cover and 8 pieces of music. So she said in this last poem that I'll read, I shall never die, for I have lived and shall live in the minds of those I have loved and who've loved me. I shall live in the minds of those who know me. I shall live and spread my consciousness over vast distances of space and time. For I have lived and loved and held the secret of life in my mind. Remember me. The second major value that my mother had, besides maintaining relationships, that I felt very much was part of my relationship with her and has influenced my life, was the value of self-reflection in the context of her culture and historical time. This value was evident not only in her correspondence, but even more prominently in the creation of the memoir that Rev Tom has drawn from in his remarks. She kept a journal for 78 years of her life, just the most recent 78. And as part of her work on elder hostels and with renewed focus when she retired 28 years ago, she began to write her memoir. Characteristically, and as Rev Tom has mentioned this, and not surprisingly, given that she was the DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church's historian and archivist, that's how she approached the task. Historian, archivist, as well as reflection. For each of the 14 chapters, she assembled these pages of photos and documents illustrating the particular period of time For example, I never knew who a butter and egg man was. A butter and egg man? But apparently this was our Uncle Hal, and she made sure to include a Smithsonian article about butter and egg man. Okay. At one point, as she was talking to me about the project, I offered to type it up so that she could revise it as she went. And in our last conversation, which is Thursday morning, she initiated the call. "What is your address after all? I can't find those address labels," was what she said to me. This is the Thursday, the day she had the stroke. But in that conversation, she also talked about time to prepare my letter. And she said, "And furthermore, when you come out, I've got the latest paragraph for my memoir." And I found it among her papers after her death. And although the 145 typed pages end in the year 1972, this was what she intended. She considered her memoir complete at that point. And she said, "By that year, all three of you kids, Lindy, Rex, and I, were adults. You have your own memories of me, so you can carry on." Characteristically, she defined the task in terms of what she was in a unique position to describe and left it to the three of us to continue the task on our own, a task we've had the opportunity today to undertake with this time of sharing. So given these two values, maintaining relationships and self-reflection in the context of her culture and historical time, which were continuing threads in our adult conversations, it's probably no surprise they were reflected in my career, first as an academic social psychologist and then as a clinical psychologist. And most recently, when I retired to be a full-time grandmother to my 3 New Jersey grandchildren these past 6 years. But it's also no surprise that my mother found a home at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church, whose principles so closely aligned with her values. Her life has demonstrated and continues to illustrate that as much as we recognize the inherent worth and dignity of each individual life, it's the interdependent web of which we are all a part that sustains us and within which we create meaning.
I don't know that anybody could take Robin's place, but we are looking for a church historian. And now, Lindy.
I wanted to tell you a little bit about the ways in which my mother influenced my life. I hope I have a photo. There we go. First is dance. My grandmother over here, my mother's mother, doing the flamenco, and my mother in high school on toe doing her dance. And so in kindergarten, I started dance lessons, and I danced through, and here I am with my friend Darcy, who can make it, but I'm on the right in case you can't tell which is which, and Darcy's on the left. So dance was certainly something that I enjoyed and all, and perhaps those of you who have been here for a while know that I continued in dance, but I went on to tap, and I have been a tap dancer here in the talent show. So dance was something that we all had in common that I really enjoyed. One of the things about dance was that I wanted to not only do dance, but I also wanted to take piano lessons, because Darcy got to take piano lessons as well as dance, so I thought I should be able to too. But my mother was a very budget-oriented person, and she had a budget, and there was not enough money for me to do both dance lessons and ballet and take piano lessons, so I had to make choices. And this is something that I have taken with me as a thing to think about and to work on all my life, and that is to keep track of the money and make choices, because we don't have enough to do everything we want to do. So I appreciate that she was someone who was really very budget-oriented. The other thing, by the time I hit 6th grade, my mother thought it was time, all of us kids, we better learn how to cook and sew. And so instead of just teaching my sister and me, how to cook and sew, she decided we needed a 4-H club. And so Darcy, as well as Pam and I, all got to be part of Lyle Lassies. That was the name of our 4-H club. And it was really nice because she was part of the DuPage Home Extension group, and we go on to another picture here because I did learn how to sew, and here's my mom with me, and this lady is judging I made the skirt, I made the top, and then my mom's holding on to the jacket, and so we got judged as part of our various projects that we learned how to do at the DuPage County Fair, so we did that for many years. Now, going on from there, one of the things that I really took to heart was that when my father died in 1973, I was graduating from college, but my father was in a coma for 5 months, and it became clear that he was not going to recover. And my mother had been a homemaker at home all this time. Even though she had her bachelor's in sociology, she was kind of interested in the library. Lyle didn't even have a library when we first got there in the 50s. And so my mom was someone who really pushed to get Lyle a library. And we had a library, and she was on the library board. And so she decided maybe she wanted to get back into library science, and as Rev Tom mentioned, she did. She went back to COD, and she got her library technical associate's degree. And I really would have to say that she knew if she wanted to be the children's librarian, which is what she wanted to be, that she needed to drop out of the board. But the librarian at the time wasn't too sure she wanted a former board member to be her children's librarian. But my mother was the kind of person who knew how to network. And she networked with her friends, and the librarian came around, and she was able to get the job, And this is very good as I went out there in the business world myself in terms of, how do you get a job? Right, okay. So I really appreciate that she helped me with that. Then the next thing was my mother was someone who was very good at setting boundaries. So when I had my son Edwin, and I was working downtown, and I'd say to Edwin, if you haven't thrown up and you don't have a fever, then you're going to school. I mean, I had a job, I had to get to work. Well, if school would call up and it was after 8:30, darn, the next train was at 11 o'clock, And I wasn't going to take a taxi home, but I'd call my mom, and she's okay, I'll go get him from school, I'll bring him back to your house, but don't be thinking you can stay for any more meetings downtown, you need to take the 11 o'clock train. She was real clear. This is what I'm willing to do, but don't push it. Gotcha, Mom. Okay, no problem. One of the fun things about having my mom live as long as she did and living close to her like I did was that we could become friends as adults. This was so special. We became friends, we came to church together, we worked on quilts together, she did quilts, I did quilts. The books, I got into the whole reading and the book clubs and all that, and even, I was only in my 50s at the time, my mother thought I should go to an elder hostel with her. Okay, so I got to know Savannah through the elder hostel. Haven't gone to another one since, but okay, Mom. And one of the other things we really got to do that was so fun was Lake Geneva. Because my mom, because we were close, we could go up there. We spent a lot of time in Lake Geneva and really enjoyed it. And along Suzanne also would come out, and we'd spend, several weeks together. Rex, of course, would be out, so during the week and on the weekends and all, we could be there. So that was really, really fun. So thank you.
And now, Rex, if you'll come and share some of your memories and reflections.
First, I would like to thank Reverend Tom Capo and also Bonnie Brewster, who worked with our family in putting this memorial service together for my mother. It was not easy. As you know, she wrote a lot of different things. She had a lot of different things to say, and she had a lot of different pieces, which are very difficult, I think. And Bonnie, thank you for taking the time and the effort to learn those different pieces. I once heard someone say that you are a child as long as your parents are living. Well, my mother's long longevity ensured that I had a long childhood. My mother, Robin, and well, I'm not going to get into any political commentary here. That's why I wanted to label this the pond. But after my mother, Robin, gave birth to me, she saved my life a few years later when, as a 2-year-old, I walked out into what I believed was nice green grass, and actually turned out to be algae covering the surface of a pond. And as I did so, I disappeared under the surface of the water. My mother rushed over and jumped into the pond, groped around for a while, and then found me and hauled me out, blue in the face, still holding my breath. It was many years later that I had an opportunity to spend a year with my mother and father in France. And I recall being out on a long-distance run with my father and him saying to me, "Rex, if anything happens to me, take care of your mother." And this was very uncharacteristic of my father. He's an ex-Marine, very good shape. And yet, a year later, he was dead after an accident on his way home from work. Those of you who knew my mother knew how much she valued her independence. And just keeping in touch with her and being there, helping her with chores and various tasks that she wanted, was really all she needed and all she asked for. Just as she valued her independence, she also allowed us to have ours, and made a point of not interfering in our lives, and yet was always there whenever she was needed to console us. The lake house was really one of her special places, as was mentioned. It was a favorite place of hers where she could entertain her friends and also spend time with the family. This is an interesting picture because, you know, she was very supportive of all of our activities, and here she is as the head cheerleader in one of my favorite activities, which was running. She was there at many important times in my life: graduations, weddings, births, funerals, and shared an extraordinary experience of witnessing the argument of Spreetsma versus Mercury Marine by our legal team in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. 2 months later, hearing the unanimous decision of 9 justices in our favor. It was only during the last few years of her life that my mother, Robin, needed more assistance, for which she relied on her children to arrange and provide for. We all cared for her. We all loved her. My wife, Ala, and I are grateful that my mother and her mother were able to meet and get to know all of their grandchildren, including the 2 youngest, Raymond and Richard. Little Raymond used to get so excited when we went to visit my mother at the Senior Living Center at Brookdale. And he was, as he hurried over to the elevator, he'd be exclaiming, "See Grandma, see Grandma," you know, to the delight of all the local residents there. And although too young to remember, we do have pictures and video clips and even a videotape interview somewhere in the house that I did with my mother and recorded in 2012 to remind them. Recent memories of my mother, Robin, which I am grateful for. The last time Kevin Weller and I played Oh Hell with her, just this past August, which is one of my mother's favorite card games. The last barbecue she attended at our home in mid-September. The last time we took her to the Arboretum, the first days of autumn this year. And the last time I visited her at her apartment before leaving on a business trip for Europe. It was on that trip that I received a call that she had had a stroke, and the last visit to the hospital on the day she died. And most recently, the inquiry for my 2.5-year-old son, Raymond. See, Grandma? We miss her. To those of you who may have lost a parent or two, I recommend 2 songs by Dido, which she recorded after the death of her father. Grafton Street, which reminds me of going back to Dumoulin Avenue, and another song, The Day Before the Day. It's on her Safe Trip Home CD.
Well, it's amazing hearing about her life. I appreciate how each of her children emphasized their own personal treasured memories of their mother. It's a way of keeping their love for her in their hearts. One more hymn that she wished to sing, for us to sing. May nothing evil cross this path. May it cross this door. Please rise in body or spirit and let us sing it together. Start this benediction with a prayer. We are grateful that Robin lived, that we saw her face, knew her friendship, and walked at least part of the path of life with her. In love, we remember her companionship. With respect, we bid her farewell. I invite you to gather your own individual feelings and thoughts, to remember Robin, how she touched your life, and say your private farewell. Amen. One final quote that Robin chose for today was written by American essayist, poet, philosopher, abolitionist, naturalist, Henry David Thoreau. Every blade in the field, every leaf in the forest lays down its life in its season, and beautifully as it was taken up. Now you all are invited to an English tea. And if you don't know what that is, you'll know in a few minutes. It's down in Creeves Hall. This is how Robin wanted those who loved her to celebrate her life.